Last year was a challenging season for James Harden and the Rockets, barely sneaking into the playoffs with a 500 record. The Rockets' best player was also left off all NBA teams despite great stats. But when Harden's teammate Patrick Beverley was asked by Basketball Insiders what he expects from Harden this season, Beverley said, MVP and leading us to the finals. Simple. Stephen A., is Beverley correct?
Correct. They're not going to the finals, but let me say a couple of things. Patrick Beverley is one of my favorite players in the NBA. He is a pit bull, got the heart of a lion. He could play on my team any day of the week. He is hardcore. He gets after it. He defends. He's not an offensive player. He'll hit the occasional jump shot, make the occasional basket, but he's on there usually for defense and energy. He's as feisty as they come, and I'm sure he means what he says because he never looks at himself at being at a disadvantage. Because, Max, I'm here to tell you, I know the kid personally. He is one of the true rough riders in the game. He doesn't have Russell Westbrook talent, but he has Russell Westbrook heart. Patrick Beverley is built like that. Let me get that out the way. Having said all of that, he's still wrong as hell. And here's why he's wrong. Because Mike D'Antoni's their coach. It's really that simple. Mike D'Antoni is a good man. He's a damn good offensive coach. Doesn't think about defense. I know people who've called him, my former partner called him Mike D'Antoni. Take the D out of the D'Antoni because there is no D in D'Antoni because his teams don't play any defense. You can't win if you ain't playing any defense. Now, some would sit there and say the exception would have been the Phoenix Suns because when Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, and all of those boys were there, had Robert Horry not hip-checked Steve Nash into the scorer's table, and then the benches sort of emptied, and guys got suspended. Phoenix would have won that series, went to the finals, blah, blah, blah. Well, damn it, it didn't happen. And in the end, when we look at this Houston Rockets team, I just think they're ill-equipped to compete for a championship. They're not relevant in a championship picture. When you look at Golden State, when you look at San Antonio, when you look at the Clippers, they're clearly the three teams to beat, and then there's everybody else. And if you're going to look at somebody on the outside looking in, I'm going to look at Oklahoma City because even though Kevin Durant is gone, Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, those boys are still there. Houston has James Harden, who is a superstar offensive player, fresh off of averaging 29, 7.5, and 6. This brother is legit. He's big time. He's an offensive juggernaut, no doubt about it. But the Houston Rockets are not going to be good enough to warrant him getting strong MVP consideration. Mike D'Antoni not going to play any defense, so you'll have an opportunity to shoot in 7 seconds or left, get the ball out your hand and jack up shots all day, which will lead to more points for James Harden. But that's not going to necessarily lead to more wins for the Rockets. It's not going to lead to championship relevancy, thereby not making James Harden that relevant in the MVP conversation. He's an MVP talent. He is big time. But the team collectively will not be good enough, and as a result, they won't warrant MVP. He won't warrant MVP consideration because they won't warrant consideration at all.
I think there's a very good chance James Harden can actually win the MVP this year. I think Patrick Beverley, who I agree with you, you gotta love the way he plays. He's so tough. He does get after it. If only James Harden cared as much about defense as Patrick Beverley cares about defense, he really would be a legitimate MVP-level player. But the fact is he doesn't. He knows, everyone knows, the way you get paid in the NBA is to put up numbers. In fact, MVP voters in the NBA, not as bad as baseball MVP voters years ago, where if you had a lot of RBIs, they just give you the MVP, even if there were literally 10 players in the league better than you. Still, MVP voters tend to reward scorers and great offensive players, and James Harden can get to the basket and he can shoot the three, that's for sure. I want to get to Mike D'Antoni in a second, or right now, rather. He revolutionized the NBA, Stephen A., with the spread pick and roll, really exploiting fully the rules changes and the three-point shot. But when the rest of the league adjusted and many adapted and adopted his parts of what he did into their own systems, like Greg Popovich, etc., and he didn't have an answer back, that means what he did, where you're like, my God, he's an offensive genius. If you have no answer once the league adjusts and starts doing you better than you do, then it's really like all you did was a parlor trick and everyone else figured it out. And one of the reasons I think D'Antoni hasn't had success since Phoenix, except briefly with Jeremy Lin, was in New York, is that he can't get his best players to buy in. Now, Carmelo's an ISO player. Kobe was an ISO player. Dwight had his own issues. James Harden's kind of an ISO player. I mean, he racks up some assists, but it's like the ball really sticks with him. And part of the job of a coach is to get your best player to buy in. You can't simply be like, oh, well, can't get the best guy to buy in. What can I do? No, that's your job as a coach to get that done. I think Harden is desperate enough right now, and D'Antoni is desperate enough right now, that it may actually be a good match because they'll have to meet each other halfway. I think the Rockets, given the bottom of the West, it's a great top-heavy conference, but the bottom leaves enough room for them to get in there. And Harden, as by far the #1 offensive option on his team, when you look at Durant and Steph going to split votes, when you look at LeBron, who takes his foot off the gas in the regular season because he saves it for the playoffs, he may not get as many votes as he really deserves, especially with Kyrie coming up the way he is. You start looking around the league, it very well may boil down to Harden and Westbrook because voters reward scorers, and so much of the offense of those two teams is going to go through those two guys. I think Harden's right in the mix, Stephen A.
But it can't be on mediocre teams, and that's exactly what Houston is going to be. Because how are you going to get two dudes with the same mentality moving? Meeting equal ground or whatever. How are you going to pull that off? They're both on the offensive side of the ball. Now, if one focused on defense and one focused on offense and you met halfway, that would be different. But both of them have the same mentality. James Harden doesn't care that much about defense as a player, and D'Antoni doesn't care that much about defense as a coach. So how is that going to work? That means they're going to be juggernauts offensively, but defensively they're going to leave a lot to be desired. That's what it comes down to the Houston Rockets, not to mention the fact that they're not going to be that good in my estimation. I have nothing but faith in Beverly. I have nothing but faith in Harden as an offensive player. D'Antoni is going to put points on the board. They're going to play an exciting brand of basketball, and I think that Houston is to be respected in that regard. But defensively, as much as sensitive as Mike D'Antoni, is about that, and it's a shame because I can't stand being critical of him because he's such a nice man. He really, really is, Max. He really is a nice guy. But the bottom line is he doesn't give a damn about defense. And no matter what he says, his history, his resume shows that he does not give a damn about defense. He even incriminated himself when he was coaching the Lakers because he was getting mad at the media because the media talked about how he didn't focus on defense at all in practice. He said, what are you talking about? I spent 25 minutes on defense. That's what he said. That's a quote, okay? I think it was 25
Stephen
or 30
I was calling him Mike D'Antoni from way back. There's no defense on, although his defensive efficiency is a little, it looks even worse than it is because there's so many possessions because he wants to score so fast. He's not quite as bad defensively as given credit for, but he obviously does not care very much about defense. I don't think that hurts his chances with MVP voters for Harden because the voters don't seem to care.
Stop. Bottom line. Coaches in the profession swear the man don't care about defense and knows very little about it.
We will leave it there.
You're watching First Take, presented by Bass Pro Shops.
Blake Griffin plans to re-sign with the Clippers and is not open to leaving, sources telling Basketball Insider. Doc Rivers echoing those sentiments, adding that he believes Griffin retires as a Clipper. Rivers is not open to trade talks on Griffin or Chris Paul, and he's not worried about either player walking away in July. Stephen A., does Blake owe the Clippers?
Yes, he does. First of all, let me say this. Blake is a star. He's box office. The Clippers should want to keep him. There's no doubt about that. He was hurt last year. I'm not going to hold his performance in the playoffs where he just averaged like 15 and 8. He was not healthy. He battled through. He missed 47 games last year, had a bevy of injuries. We understand that. The year before when he was playing and they got to Game 7 when they blew that Game 6 at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and they were destined to face the Golden State Warriors in the conference finals, and they collapsed against the Houston Rockets. Blake Griffin averaged like 25, I think it was a 25, 12, and 6 that series. Blake Griffin's big time. There's no doubt about that. But the reason why I would say he owes the Clippers is because he's big time. But they have yet to play in the conference finals. Chris Paul is there. Chris Paul, and I keep saying this, and there's a distinction, and people disagree with it, feel free. Doesn't matter. Chris Paul is a 6-foot point guard. He's an orchestrator. He's a floor general. But when you are the Melos, the LeBrons, the Blake Griffins of the world and people like that, whose size and athleticism are so imposing that you can make that kind of a difference. You've got to deliver the goods. And the fact that you haven't yet should be a bane in your existence to some degree. When you look at the Golden State Warriors and what has transpired now that they've got Kevin Durant, where are you going? I mean, Blake Griffin, the only conceivable place that he could go where you legitimately couldn't knock him, Max, if he were to get up and leave and go to Oklahoma City to join Russell Westbrook. And as great as I think Russell Westbrook is, as phenomenal of an athlete and a talent as he is, from a point guard's perspective, why would you go to him when you got Chris Paul? That, to me, is the difference. And so as a result of that, I stay put where I'm at. I got Doc Rivers as my coach. I got Chris Paul as my point guard. I got DeAndre Jordan, who is a skywalker and a phenomenal athlete at the center position. I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to roll the dice. And I think the Clippers may very well end up having the best chance to knock off the Golden State Warriors than anybody in the Western Conference. And that includes San Antonio. But that only exists if you keep Blake Griffin in tow. And if I'm the Clippers, you sign him to a long-term extension, you don't lose him. But if I'm Blake Griffin, I don't think about leaving. The Clippers have unfinished business, and it's got his name written all over it, just like CP3's.
So the Clippers do have a chance to beat Golden State, because the other day we were arguing about that. I said Clippers fans are going to believe that they have a chance to beat Golden State. You said no.
They have a chance.
Oh, okay.
They have a chance. I don't believe they will.
Tape on that.
They have a
from the other day.
chance.
Look,
you know that?
I agree with you that it made sense for him to re-sign. Because where else is he going to go? Boston, maybe you would say they need a superstar, maybe, but you ain't leaving L.A. with comparable talent to go to Boston. It's a better lifestyle. Okay, I get that. But the idea that he owes this franchise anything to me is ridiculous. First of all, an NBA player has no choice where they get drafted. He gets drafted to this team. They sign him to a rookie contract. You're not getting paid your market value, all that stuff. He makes them a destination. You know, I mean, Chris Paul winds up on the team. The NBA seemed to kind of direct him to the Clippers, but you could see that no one ever thought about playing for the Clippers before if they had really had it. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, Blake's there and DeAndre's getting better. But really, Blake made them a destination. He made them relevant. I don't think he owes them anything, but I think they owe him. But I do think that signing with the Clippers was a good idea. He's injury prone. He's shown that. There's a lot of money that he can collect, that he can, sign for and guarantee himself right now. And as you mentioned, when you look at the Western Conference, they have, of all the non-Warrior teams, they may have the best situation for him. And even if OKC did, Stephen A., he'd be trading up L.A. or trading down L.A. to go to Oklahoma City. I don't think a lot of people make that choice either. So it's a good idea for him to sign, but I don't think he owes them anything.
Max Kellerman, Blake Griffin made the Clippers a desirable destination. We understand that. So what do? They get CP3. They get Doc Rivers. You have the talent around you, and you don't finish the deal. Primarily due to injury, in all fairness to him. But you were there doing afternoon drive in L.A. You know some of those stories that was emanating out of there. Questions about the relationship with some of the players, whether it be CP3 or DeAndre Jordan. He punches some equipment manager, whoever it is, in the face because the dude was teasing him about how Blake wasn't winning and wasn't getting it done, and you overreact and hurt your hand and you're out for weeks because of that. All of these things factor into the equation because at the end of the day, if you are the Blake Griffin we believe you to be, at one point or another over the course of your 6-year career, 3 times in which you advanced to the conference semifinals, you should have found a way to get it done. Some would argue. So when you look at it from that perspective, and then you look at the personnel that you have with you, and then you look at the coaching that you have with you, you look at the city that you're playing in, you look at how vulnerable the inept, moribund Los Angeles Lakers have become, and then you couple all of that with the fact that KD now went to Golden State to try to ensure that they're going to be the team to beat in the Western Conference for years to come. If you're Blake Griffin and you got that competitive fervor inside of you, then excuse me, you don't run from that challenge. And the best challenge is the challenge that you have right in front of your face, playing for the franchise you're playing for.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep. And
That's
he
all
don't
I'm
owe
saying.
him. He don't owe him, Stephen A., but I agree with you. He should stay.
I think he owes him.
All right, let's leave it there.